All right, and we are live. Hey, folks, if you're joining us or streaming on Facebook Live, thanks for watching the Church Safety Guys. So we are all here this evening, and I will bring in my good buddy Paul Buckner and my other good buddy Michael.
Hey guys.
So real quick, if for just proprietary sake, if you guys are watching and you join, make sure from a Facebook that you accept permissions or give permissions to StreamYard. That way it will pop up and it'll tell us, that you're watching, where you're watching from. And that way Facebook kind of transmits the info to StreamYard so we can see. If you're looking for broadcast or MP3, MP4 recording software, StreamYard is a great option. I like to give them a shout out just because they've been very kind in helping us sponsoring the Church Safety Guys broadcast for a couple months just to kind of test their stuff out for them and get the word out about them. So tonight we are not going to be here for 2 hours, I promise you. And if it gets to be that point, we'll pull the plug on somebody's feed. I don't know. I don't know which person. So are you saying something, Paul? Because I can't hear you.
Oh, hang on. I had muted it so you didn't hear me typing. So my totally awesome comeback didn't even get to you. I was going to say, well, you've got 60 seconds with one church safety guy and 60 minutes with the other church safety guy. So yeah.
Right.
Well, that's because I can form my train of thoughts into 60 seconds and put them out there, unlike some people. So anyhow, if you guys just joined us, feel free to list what church you're with, what location you're listening from. And we appreciate that. We appreciate you hanging with us. A couple housekeeping things real quick. This week has been an awesome week. We actually went over 2,000 members for the first time in our group, which is fantastic. And beyond that, the other cool thing was the video that we did last week with Jason and Mike Mann Security Services actually was our most watched video. It actually popped up, and right now we have over 1,000 views on it, which means that for this group we have about a 50% engagement, which is entirely unbelievably awesome. That you guys like us that much and actually listen to what we have to say. But that being said, please feel free to share and tag people that you think might appreciate watching this, and then also feel free to like it, because as you like it on Facebook takes the algorithms and lets everybody know that you're watching it. And so that kind of helps us out too, because we see who's watching it and what type of content they want. So from today, we are going to go through a couple of things, but I did want to shout out to my buddy Michael Holland. You see him here tonight. Say hi, Michael. Hi.
Hey guys. Glad to be here.
So Michael's been helping us out a lot in the background, and he does some awesome stuff as far as he helps with content in the group, and he also actually helps with when people really filtering when people come to the group. And that's been awesome, because that's taken a ton of stuff off of my shoulders. When you get to a group of about 2,000 people, it's kind of interesting, and it's kind of hard to go through and research really who is, who's trying to join the group and why. And so Michael's been in the background for a bit now, and so we brought him in tonight. Against his will, we're holding him hostage in Tennessee.
Brave man.
We fully intend to talk down to you tonight, so and
the jokes just don't get any better. So but yeah, so we want to tonight. We're going to do a couple of things. We want to spend a little bit talking about the group and what we do. We run this group a little bit different, and we've had a few people ask us this week about why we do things the way we do them, and so we kind of wanted to touch on that a little bit. And then later on, we'll actually have John Cross, who does quite a bit of tactical training. We'll have him come in, and we're going to chat with him a little bit about just doing some basic things, trying to push yourself and go from basic to a little bit better. And if you don't have the opportunity, if you don't have the opportunity to go to a training class or a big tactical class, there's a few things that you can do on a regular basis that help you keep your skill set up. And so, if you don't have a lot of time, resources, or finances to go do the training, we'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. Just some things, some benchmarks that you can use to make sure that you're staying fit and that your training staying on par. So let's talk about. We'll just dive right into this. Let's talk about the group a little bit. And when I always say when we started this, because Paul's been kind of with me here since almost the beginning. But when we started it, one of the reasons that we started this group was because we really felt like there was a lot of information out there. There were a lot of church safety groups out there. But my heart with starting the group was that I wanted it to be a resource, and I wanted it to be really a place where the 90% churches under 500 in membership could come and get resources and not have an expense, but see legitimate, obtain legitimate information and kind of help them. Now, through the months, I mean, we've had some awesome people join us, with the Facebook Live, and folks that, typically get paid for training, paid for interviews, paid for time. They've actually joined us just to help out, and one of the big things that we've said, all of us have said from the beginning, was that, we look at the safety team as a ministry. And so when we go out and we talk to people who, post in the site or do training or that sort of thing, that's one of the biggest things that we look like. When I look at who do I want to talk to bring on the Facebook Live, I look at, what is their perspective on safety. It's one thing to come from just a tactical safety background, but it's also another thing to understand how churches operate in the ministry portion of it, because ministry is entirely different in some cases than regular operations or security operations or that sort of thing. And I think you guys know that. I mean, those of you that are watching and listening, we've had group conversations before about how from a ministry standpoint, how we treat our team a little bit different, how we interact with them, and as a whole, how we just kind of deal with that situation. So from a group standpoint, that's what we kind of look at. So we look at resources, we look at information, content, who's posting what, and I would say that that's a little bit different than the average group on Facebook. I think the average group, a lot of times, discussions posted and everybody kind of comments and chats about it, and then we move on, or that topic will come back up again. But I think with this group, we've really tried hard to make sure that the content was edifying, that people didn't get into kind of an argument match over simple things like will this work? Well, it will work, but how it works for a church of, say, 1,200 could be entirely different than how it works for, say, a church of 200. So the reality of that is, that's not saying it's a bad principle. It's just we're looking at the content and saying, okay, if you've expressed your opinion tactfully and your point, you've emphasized that point, then that's great. But a lot of times we'll look at content or a subject, and when all of the information or both sides of that coin have been presented, then a lot of times we'll just shut it down and we'll say, okay, you know what, everything's been covered here. It's now a resource. So when other churches come in, then they can decide, or people come in, they can read it, they can see both sides of the coin, and that's it. There's no more perspective, I guess, that could be added to that discussion. Now, a lot of times, I mean, I'll get a message, and I know sometimes Paul and Michael, you guys get messages too about, well, I wanted to post this perspective, or I've gotten that before. Can you unlock it so that I can post this, my side of this, or my thought? And that's fine. Typically, I don't have a problem with doing that, but that's a lot of the reason why, just housekeeping, why we do shut down things quicker in this group, because, it is a Christian group. We do screen people, obviously. We screen folks that come in. We try and change the questions to make sure the people that come in are legitimately safety teams or pastors or church leadership. And we try and keep a higher quality that way. And when I say that, I don't mean any disrespect, but I've asked people to stop that were arguing in a post and had that same individual message me and cuss me out on a message to me, and I'm like, well, wait a second. We're Christians here. We need to respect each other. So the fact that you're taking this to that level just tells me that maybe this isn't the group for you, because, that's how you're responding. So to me, that's kind of, and hopefully I'm explaining this well. I'm gonna toss it out here to Michael and Paul, so you guys can jump in if there's a point that I missed. But we talk. I mean, honestly, we talk multiple times a day. I've never had the pleasure of meeting these two guys face to face, but I can tell you that I probably talk to them more in some times than in some cases than my own family. So we chat a lot about the group, and we're all kind of passionate about it, but that's kind of where we're at. So when you say, if you message us and you say, hey, this group is a little bit different, that's kind of an honor to me. When I look at content and I look in other groups and I see people fighting and going back and forth over something simple like why a 9mm is a better caliber to have than a 40 or 45. I'm just like, I don't know how many times, honestly, and I say this tongue in cheek, but I don't know how many times you can have that discussion. Dead
horse.
So, that's why we do it. We look at it a lot of times. If somebody's new or they'll post a question, we'll message them and say, hey, search on the left-hand side. There's a search block. You can type in almost anything and see. And it's not that we're saying we're not, some topics need to be brought up again, and we try and do that because it has been a while since they've been talked about in the group. But the reality is that a lot of those discussions are just sitting there. And if you read through, there's an unlimited amount of resources there to see perspective from other churches already that have had that, versus waiting for, additional time for folks to respond to your post if they see it. But, the posts that we do let go through, there were two individuals that posted today stories about their church. We let them go through, and almost immediately people started responding back and talking about it and, offering help. And that's great. We look at it, and, if there are topics that we can cover and we can go over quickly, then that's helpful. So anything else you guys want to add to that?
just briefly, that's one of the things I love about James. When James started the page, and that was his heart, I'm in multiple other church safety groups, and I know Michael, I believe you are as well. And I have seen there's a couple pages I unfollowed because all they are is advertisements, and it's not that they were created for that. They have become 24-hour infomercials, and it just drives you nuts. And that was one thing that James felt very strongly about, was getting to clear-cut content. And then secondly is we've seen debates rage up to and including swearing at each other, which is interesting given the fact that these are church safety pages, about any number of topics that probably really don't matter at the end of the day. And so we don't try to be party poopers, but as Joe, I believe, said here a minute ago, the page is being held to a higher standard, and that really touched my heart, because you try to make sure that things are clear and they're concise. A person can get on here and search for the material they want, find it, and we're here to learn. And I will tell you right off the bat, all three of us are here to learn. And so there's every time we have a guest speaker, which, by the way, I've got to just absolutely gush about for a moment. I never dreamed in a million years when we started this thing that we were going to have. Do you like my gush comment? Yeah. I'm just gonna say I never thought it was going to come to the fact that we would have people that are national level speakers that are actually coming on here. I never thought we would get over 200 members, probably, and it's over 2,000, and it's not turned into a giant fist fight. It's something that we try very passionately to take good care of and be stewards of, I guess is the word I'm looking for. And sure. I'm really excited to see where the Lord is taking it, because down the road, we've talked about the fact there may be a podcast, and that's exciting. And there's been some invitations to us to come out to different training. So if you ever wanted to meet us, there's actually going to be occasions, good Lord willing, that we'll be at different events, and we're going to be there to learn. So, I mean, if you see us up leaning in and we've got a pencil and a pad, that's why, because we're there to learn too. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Ooh, wait, did you say pencil and a pad? Because nobody uses a pencil and a pad anymore.
Don't judge me.
And he's the IT person,
Right. Yeah. The 1980s just called, Paul. They want their, and ladies and gentlemen, he was homeschooled, so we have to pity him a little bit.
Would you like to throw anything serious in, Michael?
Michael,
I think you guys pretty much nailed it. Okay. The only thing I would add, and I don't know if you said this, James, but if you guys have something that hasn't already been said in a comment, then reach out to us, shoot us a message, say, hey, this wasn't said under that thing. We're happy to put that back in.
Absolutely.
It's just like James said, we're just trying to keep people from saying the same thing over and over again or arguing. So the whole reason of shutting it down is just to keep everybody with that Christian mindset. We're here to help each other. You've got people that have been doing this for decades. We have people that have been doing this for 2 weeks. So, sure. There's all these different things. So if you think something's a stupid question, and what may be a stupid question to you is not a stupid question to somebody that has no clue what they're doing right now. They're just grasping at straws, trying to build their team from nothing. So sure. Just keep that in mind.
And I'm just talking in generalities here, if I can speak. But, we had someone post not too long ago, a quick example. We had someone post not too long ago, hey, what type of firearm do you carry for church safety? I understand that. I mean, there are churches out there, that's a valid question. There are churches out there that require their safety folks to carry all the same firearm, to train the same way. I get it. I understand that question. But after I think about 45 or 50 of responses, we kind of closed it. And I think I got some hate mail from somebody that was like, well, why did you close it? I can't believe that you shut that down so quickly. And I said, well, if you look through the responses, and I don't mean, I say this in love, I'm not trying to be rude or mean or anything, but if you look at the actual content, you've got 40 people saying the exact same thing. I carry, this firearm, this caliber, and it comes down to just, again, that point where it's like, okay, if everyone keeps posting on this, then for content, all we're going to see is this huge giant long thing of people saying the exact same thing. So we don't typically, we don't shut it down thinking, I get to shut this down. That's not, it's more like, exactly, Joe. I love that. It's like Chevy or Ford. Sure. I mean, I could spend the next hour telling you how Chevy was the best and why it was the best.
Please address all hate mail to James McGarvey.
But, and that's the way it is. It's potato type thing. But anyhow,
I want to throw one really quick thing in.
Yeah.
So part of the reason that we try to shut the comments down when they start to get redundant is we've all received notifications, and this will make sense when I say this. How many times have we received notifications from feeds that finally we've gone click, unfollow? And what we don't want to have happen here is we don't want people to unfollow what goes on in this group. We really want this to be educational and edifying. And I really like the way that Michael put that, because we want to be Christ-like and we want to grow and learn. And I have unfollowed any number of groups just because of the hate that's gotten spewed in them. And I'm like, man, I'm out.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about let's talk a little bit about ministry and safety teams and training. I've got John Cross here kind of hanging in the background, and I'll go ahead and bring him in just a second. But Paul, I really appreciate it. And if you haven't had the opportunity or chance, Paul's been doing a mini series on the heart of servants and leadership and servant leadership in ministry and whatnot. And he's been doing little mini videos for the group. And if you haven't had a chance to look at that or watch those, I would encourage you to kind of go back if you're in a leadership role and do that. He's touched on a lot of really great topics and content. And that being said, one of the topics that we talk about a lot is just going from the good to the great with safety teams, and trying to push ourselves to be better, and to understand that sometimes in safety teams or in security type situations, a lot of times we overlook the ministry portion of it and we go straight to, hey, I need to learn how to do this function or this option or do that, or that sort of thing. So, Paul, in a nutshell,
combine your 3 hours of videos into 5 seconds.
There you go. He had, for a second, he had that deer in the headlights look. Well,
I was listening and I was going through, and Joey had asked me to turn off the comments on his post. So I was like over here admitting, and you were like, I was like, yep. So anyway, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to give it to you. What do you think is the easiest way? And we'll just talk about this for a second and then bring John in. But what do you think is probably the most valuable point that you could make on making sure that you keep a safety team ministry oriented?
Oh man, we got to go into it looking at it from a mindset of love first. Doing to others as you would have them do unto you. We're by our love will we know that others have been with will others know that we've been with Jesus. The last thing I want to do is trespass somebody that I could have helped. And I've had to do it. I've even had to get a restraining order against a lady that was this side of Jesus working powerful in her life. She's hopeless. And I mean, threatening people, it was a bad deal. And so obviously you want it to be ministry focused first. And if I'm serving alongside people, I don't know how many times I've prayed with brothers and sisters in Christ that were part of my team. We had medical and security together. And it's got to be God focused first. And I think that leadership is, you got to have a servant's heart to be the right kind of leader for a safety team. And I had a guy comment in one group I was in, and it might have been in this group. And if I call him out, I don't mean to. It's not done in disrespect. But he made a comment in one group I was in that his job as a church safety team leader was to lead the team, not to be ministering to them. And I thought, I couldn't disagree in love. I couldn't disagree more strongly. And I have been at the hospital with people on my team. I actually buried a guy on my team. He was a great guy. I miss him. I was there with him. He didn't have family, and I actually helped oversee things with his funeral. I think that I think that it has to be ministry focused first. And if we have that as Christ-like a way of looking at life as we can, we might not miss the person and flag them as a threat that actually just needs helped. So that's as close as I get to 60 seconds with anything, James.
Well, that was good. You know, I've buried safety team members. That's not I've done hospital visits. I visited. You know, a lot of times if I know someone's in the hospital, I'll try and go with one of the other guys that serve with me, and we'll visit folks that are in the hospital and try and touch base with them on more of a personal level. But I agree 100% with you. I think the difference is, honestly, if you're looking at it as discipleship versus just leading. I mean, that's, in a sense, that's kind of the difference between leading and management. I mean, if you're just managing that team, to me, in my perspective, what I've learned over the years, if you're just looking at leading that team, and you know, it's almost like you're punching a time clock. It loses the ministry passion to say, you know what, why am I actually doing this? I'm just doing it because it's a function of the church. And I think we can get that way with anything. Honestly, any ministry that we're serving in. But when I started, when we first started the safety ministry at our church, I was trying to convince my pastor to let me be over it. And I regret that conversation. No, I'm just kidding. Now, but you know, one of the things he asked me was, well, how do you see this? Do you look at it as a ministry, or do you look at it as just, you know, you're doing security? And I said, well, here's the thing. I said, to me, I look at it as ministry, but the difference is, you know, the difference really is, in a ministry, you're going to be focused on the people that are around you, that are helping, that are serving, as much as the people that you're serving. And so I know, from my perspective, and of course, that's something that I always feel like I can work on and add to and be more diligent of. You know, I have a lot of my folks watch this, you know, this video now. And so I don't look at it like this is something. I kind of feel like Paul, the apostle, and saying, you know, I don't feel like I've obtained that, but it's something that I try and walk down the road towards. And I think, honestly, that has a lot to do with it. And I think a lot of times we have to remind ourselves about that, because it's very easy to get to the point of, hey, we, you know, almost stoic. We have to have this equipment. We have to do this training. We have to. And it's like, well, wait a second. You know, how about those times when tonight I was doing a safety security detail for a kids activity where the kids went off church campus and went to a video arcade as like a kids activity. And so, you know, even something as simple as that, you know, when I went, I had, you know, 7 and 8 year olds ask me to help, you know, take them to the restroom, or to, you know, help them go from one group to the other and this stuff. And it's like, you know, I look at it and I think, you know, that the average person, if you have a hard time sitting down and praying with somebody, if you have a hard time leaving your post for the sake of praying with somebody or ministering to someone, that should be a red flag to say, okay, wait a second, you know, maybe I need to tweak. And not that, you guys know what I'm saying. I mean, you stay at your post. I'm not saying run away and do something else, but you know, I know when the Holy Spirit has moved me to go step in and talk to somebody. And I think that's the difference, because if I'm not listening to that, then there should be a flag there with that ministry and serving. So, Michael, I'm going to turn it over to you real quick and see if you have any thoughts, and then we'll bring John in.
Yeah, the only thing, you know, as far as my guys, I try to make it a point. I'm blessed to have a small team right now, or I think that's blessed. But you know, I can kind of make my rounds and check in with everybody, shake hands, you know, and I just encourage you guys to do that. You know, whether you're on duty, you know, just go check on your guys, make sure they're okay. You know, there's been times when I've pulled off and covered for a guy. I wasn't set to be on duty, but I could just tell something was up with them and they wanted to be in service, or they needed to be.
Amen.
So, you know, sometimes we just need to do that as leaders, to step up and say, hey, I realize something's up. Why don't you go sit with your wife and service? I'll take this post. And, you know, I think that goes a long way. So just make sure you're checking in with everybody.
And it comes back to you, because I had a guy come up to me. I was really struggling with something with a loved one, and my heart was really broken for them. And one of my guys walked up and he kind of looked at me and he goes, and I would say, like, I really want you to get fed today. Or I really, you know, I would say something like that to my guys when they would volunteer outside of the times they should volunteer. And he looks at me and he's like, I really think you need to be in there today getting fed. And I was like, you're right, I do. And it was my scheduled Sunday. And he's like, man, I got this, go. And I needed that so much. And, you know, you lead by example, and it'll probably come back to you.
Absolutely.
Cool. Good stuff. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Mr. Cross in, John. So we'll add him. How are you, sir?
Oh, good evening. I'm doing great. How about yourselves?
Good.
Hey, John.
Hey, John, thanks so much for joining us. I will go ahead and turn it over to you. If you could just tell us a little bit about your background and talk about your training and ministry, and that would be awesome.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm honored that you invited me to participate with this. I don't take it lightly to be involved with a great group of people to go before the people with some information. So I'll just hop to it, and you know, I hope everyone well, and everybody's families are safe, and that things went well at church today. A little bit about my background. Although I train in firearms and what I call threat mitigation for typically the sensitive areas, the non-permissive or the soft target environments, actually in audiovisual and media management. So for the past 10 years, I've actually been the media director or chief audio engineer and technical director of a very large metro church here in Memphis, with a sanctuary that's seats about 3,000 people, sits on 30 acres, and has multiple campuses. And one of the interesting things about being in what I call the eagle's nest is my perch has allowed me to see things that other people in the sanctuary can't see, including the people who are on the platform. Before I did media and engineering in the church, I was a musician in the church. And I can tell you, as a musician, you have a very myopic view of what's going on. You know, you're watching what's happening on the pulpit. You're looking at the choir director, the singers. You may look out at the crowd, but it's all like a little blur. And you either have tunnel vision or just expansive vision, but you really don't see detail.
Sure.
But when you are when you're the technical director and you're in the hey, I lost my screen. You guys still have me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
I don't know what happened there. If when you're the media director, you can see everything, you know. So I can see when the church security are praying, when they shouldn't be praying, you know, their eyes are closed, and you know, I can see, you know, people walk in, and I've literally seen people get down to the pastor when someone should have intercepted them. And so over the years from that perch, I've actually I started developing some philosophies about how to, because I didn't feel as safe as I could feel. I've had some personal things that happened that caused me to have to up the personal security of myself and my family. And as a result of that, I increased my personal training. And the more I increased my training, the more I realized, as a person who had a concealed carry permit, I did not have the skill that I thought that I had, you know. So,
Sure.
But because I had that security matter, you know, I had to increase my training significantly. And so the more I did that, the more philosophically I was able to take that training and say, you know what, we can apply this to churches. And so over the years, I've just started developing some techniques on how to better protect churches and how to train people to protect churches from the most lethal threat. So I know there are quite a few security issues that we may face in church, from people being disruptive to making sure that someone doesn't grab a child that they're not supposed to, or somebody getting access to the offering or the stewardship area that they shouldn't. But obviously, the least likely thing to happen is also the most catastrophic thing. When it happens, when we see and shoot up churches, at any given church, that's probably a very low probability event, but the impact of it is significant. And so with me doing my personal training, I just said, hey, we have to up the security and up the level of skill for those who are designated as what I call the threat mitigators in the church. So God opened some doors for me to be able to get some very advanced training with some special forces units, with special forces instructors. And it could be nothing but God that opened that, because this particular type of training generally is only open to law enforcement personnel and people who are active military. But this defense contractor that I worked with allowed me to get the training. Now, they did some background checking, and things before that. But this defense contractor, they were all Delta Force instructors, and they have a way of developing very high quality shooters. And so, not to make it about the gun, but when the active shooter comes, as we saw in Texas, it really is about the gun, and it's about precision, and it's about being able to do it under stress in the midst of a tremendous amount of people.
Amen.
And you literally have to figure you got one shot to do it. So my focus has been basically developing people with what I call a brilliance in the basics skill set, that on a dime, at the moment that you need it, you can make the shot that counts. So that's sure. Generally a bit about my background, and so I took that over the last 2 or 3 years and really started focusing on going before the churches and talking to pastors and church councils and deacon boards and directors of security, and letting them know there's an advanced level of training that's out there. Training that the police department's not going to give you, training that the typical gun range is not going to provide you with. And so I provide some intensives that are multi-day, and actually they're multi-week events. So it's not you come to the range one day and you have the skill set. No, we're going to teach you, drill you, train you, drill you, train you some more, correct you, drill you some more to make sure that you have that skill set in your hand. It's a muscle memory, and it's right there. And that actually develops a mindset at the same time. It's the mindset sure. I call the dauntless mindset. So I could go on and on. So let me stop. You can ask me.
Well, I just want to, I do want to say, oh, I'm getting a little feedback. Hang on. Sorry. I do want to say, one of the things that you mentioned, and I know in previous posts, one of the things that you've mentioned is the title threat mitigator. And I love that, because to me, that kind of encompasses so much more than just being security. Because when you're mitigating something, you're looking at everything, but you're also you're trying to fix that problem. You're not trying to hammer a round peg into a square hole. You're looking at it like a problem solver that you kind of have to assess everything as you go, and you have to have the mindset and the quality mindset to assess it as you go, and to realize that, most things happen, with the church, most things happen on a very short notice, very quickly.
Right.
And I appreciate that, because to me, and that's kind of how you've stood out to me, because, understanding that is, again, anybody can, and I've seen it before, and I'm sure you have too. Anybody can slap some PowerPoint presentations together and be like, hey, this is church safety, let's talk about church security or this or that.
Right.
And I've actually, more recently, I've actually stopped a few churches from doing that training, because they thought this was a great, $600 course that they would learn everything, and it was 2 days, and nobody in the state had ever heard of this guy.
Right.
But what do you think, like, for someone that's starting off, or a church that's starting off, what do you think some just basic things to look out for, or things to do to kind of work towards that mindset? What would your recommendations or thoughts on that be?
So generally, when I talk to a pastor or a leader at a church, I really get down to it in terms of helping them to understand that the concept of it'll never happen here is a concept that they have to abandon.
Sure.
Because it didn't happen here yesterday, doesn't mean that it won't happen here today or tomorrow. And the time to prepare for you did not anticipate happening is today. You can't prepare for it tomorrow. You have to prepare for it now. So when I speak to leaders, I really get into dealing with how much time are you willing to let go by, and how much life are you willing to lose during that time? Because you can lose life, and so I don't really sugarcoat it. It's a matter of, do you have the ability to stop someone or see someone in the parking lot? Do you have the ability to see someone or stop them coming up the steps? Do you have the ability to stop or see someone that abruptly gets up out of the pew, just like we saw in Texas, and do something unimaginable? And then literally I go to the scripture, and I take a different approach to the scripture. I think I've seen many people use Nehemiah, and he's on the wall and he's building the wall, and he has his trowel in one hand and the sword in the other. And that's a great illustration. But I go to the scriptures that says, thou should not tempt the Lord thy God. In the scripture that God will allow his people to be martyred. We know that he will allow that, right? So, but that doesn't mean that we have to participate in that. So if we consider that Satan took Jesus up to the high mountain and said, if you be the Son of God, then cast yourself down, for it's written that he will give his angels charge, concerning you, right? So we know that's the scripture, but then what did Jesus say? It is written, thou should not tempt the Lord thy God. So if we know that these threats exist, then we can either say we're going to tempt God prepare for God to miraculously allow us to rise to our high level of training to deal with the situation right then and there. So for me, when I talk to the church leaders, I literally get to the fact that we have seen time and time again, bad things can and do happen at churches and to churches and people in churches. And so from then I start asking a series of questions. Do you have vigilance in the parking lot? Do you have vigilance in the foyer? Do you have vigilance in the sanctuary? Do you have vigilance when the fire So for instance, we've all learned that when the fire alarm is pulled, we must all exit the building. But does your security ministry or safety ministry or protection ministry have a plan to make sure that the outside of the church is secure as these thousands of people are going out? So if they don't have a plan in mind for that, then that allows me to get them to thinking that, hey, I need to have a plan for this, a plan for the dignitary protection of the pastor, the pastor's wife, the special guests we have, the children's ministry. We need to have a plan to protect when we're moving the money from one part of the sanctuary to the stewardship office. We need to have a series of plans. We need to have a plan when we have a special event. And so once I introduce that, then I ask, do you have the plan? What is your plan? Well, most likely, I tend to ask, what is your plan instead of do you have a plan? Because sometimes people will say yes. You know, that's a yes or no question. They'll say yes, even though they don't have the plan, you know. So I tend to say, what is your plan? And you can tell right then if they're having to try to pull it off the top of their head,
sure,
that they don't have a plan. And so that brings them to a point of saying, you know what, we need to have some serious conversation about it.
Yeah, I like the fact that you brought up the fire alarm as an example. And the reason is because, you know, you go for so long with a certain mindset of this is how this is going to play out, or this is how this is going to happen. And, you know, I think it was 2 weeks ago, we actually did a fire drill at my church. And I noticed, you know, as it was going off, I was walking around kind of watching what people were doing and what safety folks were doing and everything else. And I kind of walked away and I had a list because I was writing notes, Paul. But but one of the things I said was, you know what, I think it was actually more beneficial for me than for other people. And the reason was because I picked up and saw gaps that I thought were taken care of. Like I didn't think of certain aspects of questions that came up. You know, how our folks responded, just discussions that I realized very quickly we had never had. And so when I realized there was a hole in that, then I was able to kind of go back and say, okay, wait a second. Now this is how we need to fix this and address this and just make it, you know, operate more smoothly. So, you know, and I've been doing this for I think almost 15 years now. But to me, it's like, you know, there's always something somebody can learn. And, you know, if you're not critiquing yourself and asking yourself, you know, okay, how about this policy? You know, we sit down, we look at the safety policies every year, because I know there are things that have happened in the last year that impact or could impact our perception or the application of those policies. So I will sit down with a selected group of individuals and I'll say, okay, guys, let's talk about this. You know, does this make sense? Should we change it based on, you know, this experience? Is it worthwhile? Is it fine? Do we leave it alone? But just having that conversation keeps it new and keeps it fresh, because then it challenges everybody that serves to know what the policy is and to be active with it.
Right.
But Paul or Michael, do you have anything you want to ask John?
Comment. I love how you said vigilance in the parking lot or in the foyer or at these different posts, because we've all dealt with a situation or had to remand ourselves because cell phones are so readily available and it's easy to get distracted, and people begin to have conversations and they get distracted or pulled away, or we even have maybe people in our church body who are not as on board with what we're doing as we wish they were, and they try to pull our team members away. And so I love the word vigilance, because you're not just standing watch, you're being vigilant. Right. And I commented on that, and I wish I had said underneath it, I like that, because I really do. I like the way you phrased that.
Yeah, you know, so for me, I talk to pastors about what I call 8 levels of protection of the church. All right. And, in those 8 levels, obviously for me, you're starting outside. You're looking at what we're going to do, in education, so that's outside. What are you going to do in terms of protection? What are you going to do in terms of interception, of bad actors, disruptive people, someone that brings a backpack in or bag, or has an unseasonable wear on, how are you going to intercept them? Who's going to? So all of these layers are hopefully stopping the threat, making people who may be doing some pre-threat surveillance, making them say, you know what, this is not the spot that we need to hit, or I need to come to that. I need to consider something else, which is part of the mitigation. So we've obviously, I don't want. I would rather a threat actor not hit anywhere, but if they're going to hit somewhere, let them not hit where we are. You see, and so you use mitigation techniques to thwart that, to misdirect them. But then also you have to have some plans on reaction. So if something does happen, what do we do immediately after that? And how do we care for people after that? So that's medication. That's all part of those 8 layers for me. If we do some things to layers, then we really can create a secure church. So typically with my clients, so I have some churches that that are smaller. They may have 1 or 2, or maybe 2 or 3 people who are serving as armed protectors. They may serve as armed protectors and be more of the visible security or safety team. But then I have some churches that have a totally separate, that we call them the brotherhood or sisterhood ministries, that all they deal with are the disruptive people. So someone who pops up in church wants to have some loud things to say, don't want to adhere to the instructions of the ushers or the greeters or what have you. Then you have this team, they deal with that. Those team members tend not to be armed, because I train that I don't want them, if you're having to be in close proximity to someone, to immediately have in your mind that I go to the gun to solve an issue, whether to enforce compliance or something like that. No, the gun should not be the option. But then we have those that are mitigators, and typically with my clients, the mitigators are never seen. They are clandestine. They may be a musician, they may be a deacon, they may be a greeter, they may be somebody in the choir. They're strategically placed. Somebody on the media team. Again, they're strategically placed. And the only time they would come into action is if there were a lethal threat. Outside of a lethal threat, they're not touching the firearm. Their firearm or whatever weaponry is not coming out whatsoever. And so you leave this brotherhood or sisterhood to deal with the disruptor, to deal with the lost child, to deal with the father who hasn't been able to see his child for the last 3 weeks, and they have a dispute with the mother that's going through the courts or what have you, but he knows that at 10:30 she's going to be at church. When we have some people who can deal with that, and at the same time, there will be a threat mitigator who's nearby, but no one knows who that person is. So the greeter is saying, welcome to church, but the greeter is also saying, hey, brother such and such, this person does not look right. Can you get some additional scrutiny, on that person? Mm-hmm. And that additional scrutiny can look very simple, like, hey, brother, we haven't seen you here before. Welcome to church. What brings you in? You see, I see you have a backpack. hey, for your safety, we need to check that. So the greeter has gotten that information to someone who's checking that, and someone else is standing off to the side in the event that the person becomes very uncooperative and, let's say, has something lethal in the backpack. Now, they can actually be mitigated without the person who's mitigating them actually being under the threat. That's one of the sad things that we saw in Texas. The first person to unfortunately lose his life was right there, and he went for the lethal threat, right? And so, or he went for his weapon. It may have been better for him, and I'm not going to Monday morning quarterback him, but it may have been better for him to go off line of attack as a distraction, so that someone else, who in this case, the gentleman who was able to stop the threat, was able to do that. So that's one of the things. So I teach, so as part of my training, I teach the off line of attack. You can't outdraw the drawn gun. So if we know we can't outdraw the drawn gun, we can do things to earn our draw. So we can shift quickly. We can deflect. We can change the distance, change the angle. So all of that has to come into your training. And so for me, I offer a very comprehensive training where we go through all of those types of things.
Cool. Michael, did you have anything that you wanted to ask?
I think you guys have pretty much covered all of it. It's been good stuff.
So I see somebody was curious about, whether, the group has hand-to-hand, skills. So that's part of it. So typically, especially like with my larger churches, I ask them to have 4 teams, as part of the safety team. All right. And those 4 teams, and I described, 2 of them, but you have what I call the dignitary, almost executive protection type team. That's close protection for the pastors, the guests, any special guests that may come in or what have you. And one of the requirements for them, or the skill set for them, is hand to hand. They must have grappling skills. They must have trapping skills. So because they're going to be close in. They have to be close enough to protect the dignitary, but not so disruptive that the man of God cannot touch the people. Right. So the man of God, must be able to, commune with the people, touch the people, hug the people, shake the people's hand. And so we can't cordon them off, so far that they can't do that, which means then that if somebody does not want to, or they have bad intent, then that team needs to have grappling skill, how to control somebody's body safely for everybody around, including the person that they're having to control, because we're not in the business of trying to break people's arms and things like that, but we need compliance at this moment, so that we can usher you off to the side to where someone else can minister to you. So you need the hand skills for that. That's a dignitary protection team. I described the brotherhood or sisterhood. And remember, I described them as typically being unarmed. So what are their skills? Their skill sets are de-escalation skills, how to speak softly with loving tone, and at the same time command, not command attention, but own the situation, right? So they have to have de-escalation skills, as well as some hand-to-hand skills, not for the purpose of beating someone up, but again, to helping them to get to a more calm environment, to get to an environment where they can get some help. Or unfortunately, if you have to trespass them, get them to an environment where the police can come and officially trespass them without being disrupted. And so then, of course, you have the threat mitigators who They need that type of skill too in order to be able to maintain control of their weapons, if they be able to disarm someone if they're in proximity and a weapon comes out. Because if I'm manning a door and someone comes in with a rifle, I may not necessarily have to shoot them. There is a skill set that you can have to disarm them or incapacitate them. So you need that. And then obviously we talked about you need that people who have the medical skill set, because we know that until the scene is clear, EMS is not coming in, but people may be in dire need of life-saving care. And so then you have to help develop what we call the church health organizations to be able to literally put hands on people to pack a wound, to stop the sucking wound. You see, to stop the bleeding, to make sure people are breathing, to keep people from hyperventilating or going into an ecstatic state that actually causes strokes or heart attacks and things like that. So you need a lot of hand skills, definitely.
Sure. One of the things you touched on was the working with the pastors and protecting the pastors or the ministers and their wives, their spouses, their families. And it's pretty interesting. We had a situation not too long ago where we have a session outside of or after church that individuals that are new to the church can come visit the pastor and pray with them or meet them and that sort of thing. And so we always have someone in that room with the pastors, because we feel like, okay, we're opening it up. We don't know who's interested in coming and that sort of thing.
Right.
And there was one particular Sunday that I was with our senior pastor in that room, and a lady came in and she started really, the first thing I noticed was she was really hands-on. Like she was like touching his arms, grabbing his wrists, kind of like, being very energized with the conversation. Mm-hmm. And so I was about an arm's length away from him, and I heard him say to her, "Well, would you like to pray?" And she said, "Yes, I'd like to pray with you." So they started praying, and I was just kind of, my head down, kind of listening quietly. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden she said, "Thank you so much," and amen. And then she started crying, and her crying went from crying to screaming, crying very loudly. And she shoved the pastor back, because she had her hands on his arm. She pushed him back, and then she like fell on the ground and just started scream crying. And I'm like, okay, what just happened here? I'm not really sure. So I stepped over, and she just, she was just kind of like laying there crying. And I reached up to the pastor, and I kind of pushed him back a little bit, and I said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm fine." He said, "She's kind of dramatic like this." And I said, "Okay, so what do you want me to do?" And he said, "You know what, let's just give her a second, and then we'll regroup, and we'll go from there." And I said, "Okay." So I just kind of stepped back, and then at one point, I guess when she was done, he kind of looked up at me and motioned, and I stepped forward, and we helped kind of pick her up, because she was an older lady. And so she left. And I said, "Wow, that was kind of interesting." And he agreed with me. He's like, "Yeah, I didn't expect that to happen, but she tends to be very energetic, kind of dramatic. I didn't feel like my safety was being questioned. I just felt like she needed an opportunity to cry." And I said, "Well, the people that I know, usually when people cry, they don't throw themselves on the floor. So I'm not really sure, what that was about." But it really, from the emphasis of ministering to the pastors in leadership, or ministers in leadership, and that set for the church, that really, for me, kind of made a platform of saying, look, this is something that doesn't get considered a lot. you know, a lot of times we don't think about protecting our pastors, or you know, watching out for their family or their spouse. And a lot of times, I know Paul and I have talked about this before, but a lot of times they'll come in, they'll sit in the exact same location, you know, for the exact same amount of time. And you know, if an individual were to come in and kind of watch their patterns and their traffic, it would be pretty easy to, you know, to pinpoint where they normally sit, and you know, to potentially do something. So that's
So I've seen the extremes on when it comes to that subject. So I've seen pastors who perceive literally almost that the only threat is the threat to them and their family, and are not very considerate of what may happen to the congregation. Now, obviously, that's changing a bit now, you know, because of just the things we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years, you know, in terms of the frequency of devastating attacks at churches. But again, I've seen pastors who take a lot of intensive security for themselves very seriously, and not much for the congregation. But I've also seen the other side. I've seen, you know, churches that have a decent security footprint for the church as a whole, but the pastors have been hyper or extremely accessible, and of the mind that, oh, nothing to me. But the thing is, you remember, everyone who comes to church is not saved. You know, so there are two elements of that. So there are people who come to become saved, right? And sometimes that's a process that takes some time, right? You know, for them to get there. And then there are people who are there and they come to do harm, or they may flip to do harm, right? So it's just like, again, in Texas, they knew the person. He had been there before among them, you know. So on at first glance, you may say, even though he's disguised today and he's a little weird, you know, did they anticipate, man, he's got a shotgun under there, right? You know, so
yeah.
So a minister could have been too accessible to him, because again, what are the famous last words? It'll never happen here.
Amen.
It'll never happen to me, right? And those are the things that get us the most in trouble, you know. So sometimes then, if we're thinking about helping to protect the dignitary, we have to think for them, because often they're not thinking about their own safety.
Sure.
And I think that's just a crucial thing to keep in mind.
Great. Well, I definitely I appreciate your time tonight, John. Paul and Michael, do you guys have anything else that you want to chat about real quick? I want to be respectful.
Just a quick throw out for John here. Your program, are you just offering that in Memphis? Are you going to churches, or are you having people come to you? What's your setup there?
All right. So I have a training range that I have access to that I conduct all my training on. It's a pretty extensive complex, and it has some advanced training facilities in it. Now, so we train only on the outdoor range. I do have the ability to travel and train as well, but generally people come to our complex to train at. So so my company, I have two companies: Dauntless Tactical Training and Effective Church Protection. All right, and we do the bulk of our training at a place called K&M Precision Rifle Training, where I have instructor privilege. So the facility is fantastic. Again, we're able to train on a 270-degree range, so we get to move, you know, shoot from train from various positions or what have you. I do go into churches to do some of the non-lethal aspects of the training. All right, you know, so but in terms of the intense marksmanship, and we really do drill on the intense marksmanship, because you know, as like right now, I have a cohort with a church in training, and I constantly tell them, Sister Mary is over there, and you cannot hurt her. So your skill set has to be very high. You can't hurt Sister Mary, and you can't hurt, Brother Jack. Your skill set has to be very high. And so we're very intensive with that training. But my program, I can export it anywhere because we have very specific drills set up. And even if like I'm having to use a range that does not have moving targets, I have some drills that are set up to help build the same skill set without having access to the moving target.
Okay. All right. Well, sounds good. That's really all I have. I'm actually out in Lakeland, so I'll probably be visiting you guys real soon. I want to get down and check out your program. So.
Okay. Yeah, man. I'd love to meet you. You're in Lakeland, Tennessee?
Yeah, I'm in Lakeland. Yeah, we're neighbors. I'm right up the road.
Oh yeah. I could probably drive to you in 20 minutes.
Right. So yeah, I'm coming to you this summer. I'll come out and check it out.
Okay, great.
I'm a little jealous, I have to admit. I wish I was that close. I know that all of us are all about training. And one of the things that you were talking about, John, about getting in close to the pastor and what have you, I was actually doing a very close security detail for a husband-wife team that were doing street ministry. And I was standing, and I must have looked really, really casual, which I tend to be told I look really, really overt when I'm doing it, because this guy took an aggressive step towards, I don't think I'm that covert, and he took kind of an aggressive step towards the pastor's wife while she was doing the ministry. And there was some concern about the safety of another woman. And as this guy kind of took a step forward towards her, I kind of took a step in, and I kind of put my hand between him and her. Boy, the guy just looked at me and looked at her and took a step back, and it was a totally different conversation. And I don't know if he would have struck her or not, but he was trying to emphasize, in my opinion, that his size and masculinity trumped what she was trying to say. And it was an entirely different conversation. And she had never really verbally appreciated what we were doing for her until after that moment. And when we got back in the vehicle, she turned to me and she was like, "Thank you very much for how you handled that." Because it was just enough, it didn't have to go further.
Well, it's two movies come to mind: The Bodyguard with Whitney Houston and Kevin Costner, and Taken. If you remember both of the initial scenes of protection, in The Bodyguard, Whitney, she was really lax with her security until, somebody really was about to do her harm that first time, and Kevin had to whisk her away. And then she really realized, here's the value of that particular skill set. The same thing in Taken, when that opening scene when he's protecting the singer, the guy, he looks invisible in the background. But there's certain set of circumstances that can occur that now you need this very particular set of skills, or you just need the presence to change things right there. And then next week, you'll be there again, and you'll be sitting in the background, and hopefully nothing will happen. You won't have to intervene. But in the event that you do, your primary would know, hey, I'm free to be, and I will be protected at the same time.
Awesome. All right, sir. Well, anyone else have any other questions?
No, thanks, John. Appreciate your time tonight.
Oh, you're welcome. I enjoyed it. I appreciate you guys asking me to join in with you. I've had a blast.
Good. We'll have to have you back sometime.
All right. Well, if I can contribute anything, I'd be happy to participate.
I appreciate it. I'll pull you off, but thank you, John.
All right. Thank you. You guys have a great evening.
Thanks.
Something I think I may try to do. This is just a little note for us later. I'm going to start muting my mic when I'm not using it, and see if we get rid of whichever one is causing that feedback. I've got a separate PC. You guys see me looking over here. That's what I'm doing, is handling little issues and things. And I found Dauntless Tactical, and I was looking for that church safety group page on Facebook that he's got. So I think it worked very well tonight. Thank you, John, for he sent a link to us on the on the web address for Effective Church. It's effectivechurchprotection.com. And I think it was a great conversation, because I can tell just in this conversation that I would go and learn a great deal from this man in person. And that's with 10 years of church safety behind me. I mean, I have no doubt this guy can answer a whole slew of questions, and even just some of the ways that he termed things. I don't know about you guys, but I loved some of the ways he termed things, like using the terms vigilant. That puts a whole other spin on it. Because I had a couple of guys that I actually scared one of my guys on purpose, because he wouldn't stay out of his phone. So he looked like this, in his phone, and I walked up next to him and he's like, "Ah!" And I was like, yeah, I could have been a bad guy. So
I like the fact that he doesn't just try and push everything into a 1 day or 2 day thing too. And I've noticed that, like, on his website, which I actually posted it here. So if you ever have any questions, you can go there. And he is part of the group, so feel free to reach out to him that way as well. But it's almost like a boot camp for church safety. I mean, honestly, if you think about it and think about how often we talk about trying to find time to practice the skill set, and I mean, we were just talking this weekend about, between the three of us, for those of you that were watching, we were actually talking about the Jack Wilson, what I started calling the Jack Wilson challenge. And that's, can you effectively, shoot a firearm at an active, distance of 60 plus feet or across your sanctuary? Well, I measured, one of our guys measured our sanctuary and said it's 81 feet across from, one side to the other. And for me, that pushed me to say, okay, if I can't hit accurately within 70, 75 feet, then there's a problem. And so I went to Saturday morning, I went to the range and practiced for a decent amount of time. And that's what, but when I left, was I where I wanted to be? No, I wasn't, but it was a good start to say, moving forward, this is what I need to push myself and train myself at, because, it's when you get to the point of being comfortable with stuff, that's the enemy of it. Because then in your mind, you start thinking, okay, I'm good. My skill's good. It's not. It's a perishable skill. I mean, anything that you spend more time doing, whether it's a hobby or not, can be perishable very, very quickly if you don't spend time, bring that back up and practicing it. So
there's a drill I love. I got a comment. You've seen the video of it. It was one of the very first things I tagged you in, James, when we became friends. And the drill is, you take a shotgun shell and you lay it on a target 3 yards from you. And that doesn't seem like a very small target until you realize it's about the size of your thumb. And that's your precision shot. You've got to put a shot in a specific spot. And then the second shot is at 100 yards, and it's an IDPA size steel target. It's a torso target. And you've got to be able to hit, it's a little bit of the head and the shoulders and down to part of the chest is what it equivalent is the equivalent of. And the goal is that you can take a shot cold and hit the first one, and then drive out and hit the second one at 100 yards. And I'm really good at the close one. And I've got a buddy that shoots competitively, and he's insanely good. And I love to train, by the way. It's like playing pool against a pool shark. You bet you're going to get good quick, or you're just going to keep losing. And I love to train next to this guy, because he really stretches me and forces me to get better. And I will, just a little bit of tell on myself. I thought I was pretty dadgum good years ago. I outshot my friend group. And I had a guy come out to the house, and he was doing something for us construction wise. And he had been an operative for Blackwater. And we got to talking, and he goes, "Do you ever shoot?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I shoot." It's kind of like pulling out my pool cue, and yeah, I play a little pool. And he goes, "Let's shoot a little bit." And then he stomped me, and he goes, "Yeah, you don't shoot too bad." And, it was a good sucker punch, been close to a decade ago, if not a decade ago. And I mean, I thought I was pretty dadgum good until this guy shot next to me. And I realized I didn't know what I didn't know. And had I been in a gun battle with somebody with his skill set, he would have taken 3 of me out. And so that really challenged me to start getting quality training. And that's where, Michael, you've heard me talk about it. James, you heard me talk about it. I'm like, if you have to sacrifice a safe queen to get quality training, I guarantee you in the middle of a shootout, if you could press pause and be like, I'd like to sell that $2,000 rifle and upgrade my training right now. Thank you. Unpause. You can't do that in a shootout.
I'm very blessed. I'll say this, and then we need to close in prayer because I promised this would be a shorter video. But I will say that, you know, the mark of a true servant leadership is to go with a friend that you have on the safety team and actually shoot better than them and not put it in their face. That's all I'm going to say, because I went Saturday morning, I went with two individuals, and one of them who actually serves with me outshot me at that distance. And I'm like, you know, it's probably because I forgot my glasses. Where are my glasses? But no, I mean, that's, you know, having a humble attitude obviously goes a long way with all of that stuff. And besides the joking, I've said that many times that, you know, if the three of us ever got into an opportunity or a range where we could sit back and shoot, I'm pretty sure Paul would probably whip both of us, and he'd have to give us a participation trophy because, hey, thanks for showing up, guys. But, you know, I don't know, training and moving forward, there's always stuff that you can say, there's always stuff that you can do. That's kind of the point. Just make sure that, you know, you're pushing yourself and you don't get in a place where you're comfortable and you think you know everything. Because I mean, even from a biblical standpoint, at the point where that's kind of like asking, from my experience, that's kind of like asking for patience or praying for patience, right? Because, you know, it's one of those things that as soon as you are comfortable where you are, God has a tendency of pushing you beyond that and really testing you to see if you're as sharp as you think you are, right? So,
yeah,
fun times.
So you gents want me to close it in prayer tonight, or?
Absolutely. It's all you, sir.
Dear Heavenly Father, Lord God, I have enjoyed tonight. And I hope, Lord God, as iron sharpens iron, I hope that you have allowed this to be a blessing to others. I know it was a blessing to me, and I know it got me excited, and it's got me thinking about some training opportunities and even just some new ways of thinking about wording things, Lord God. I thank you that we can always learn more about your word, about how to minister, and Lord God, and in the unfortunate circumstance that we might have to stop a deadly threat in our midst, Lord God, to act quickly and decisively, Lord God. And I thank you for these men and women. I thank you for Michael and for James, Lord God. And as we seek and serve you, I ask that you would give us the desires of our heart, Lord God. Just bless and protect us and our flocks. Lord God, your word says that if God does not watch over the city, the watchmen watch in vain. And Lord God, we ask that you would watch over our church bodies and our church families. In your son, Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Man.
All right, folks, have a great evening. Thanks for hanging with us. Keep your powder dry, and we'll see you next week.